capital. But let me just say this. Sure. They're not a freedom from religion. They're a freedom from history. They have a war on history. I was taught that Ben Franklin was a deist. We have in his own handwriting Ben Franklin's speech after 5 weeks of accomplishing nothing at the Constitutional Convention when he said, "This is mine. I have lived so a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth. God governs in the affairs of men, right. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his nose, is it possible an empire could rise without his aid?"
Well, let me bring David in. David,
that's part of.
Sorry, rude of me. Do you like the honor?
No, no. You do it by all means.
Thank you.
Advance!
An atheist group puts up a billboard in Costa Mesa that's kicking up controversy. It quotes Thomas Jefferson bashing Christianity. But there's a problem. The Jefferson Library says there's no evidence the president ever said it. Orange County Bureau Chief Eileen Frere has more on the billboard and reaction to it.
The billboard sits near Newport Boulevard in Costa Mesa. It reads, "I do not find in Christianity one redeeming feature. It is founded on fables and mythology." The billboard attributes the quote to Thomas Jefferson. One problem, though, there's no record Jefferson ever said that.
If it wasn't quoted from Thomas Jefferson, then obviously they should have done their research first before putting something up like that.
A group called Backyard Skeptics that includes atheists is behind the billboard. An anonymous donor with the group Backyard Skeptics paid $4,000 for this billboard and one other to be on display for 2 weeks.
And I realized after the billboard was put up that it was a misquotation. There is no historical documentation of that.
The head of Backyard Skeptics says the billboard was meant to promote secular values.
That you can do good and be good without God in the group Backyard Skeptics.
But Bruce Gleason admits the inaccurate quote could hinder their message.
The billboard hurts us because there's other religious people that have said, "Aha, look at those atheists, they're misquoting Jefferson." Well, I take it upon myself to say, yes, I made a mistake.
The truth is, Galileo was under arrest for the last 10 years of his life because he held views that the Catholic Church, the organized dominant religion of his culture, because they did not approve of his opinions. And someone who is often not recognized is Giordano Bruno, who was actually burned alive on February the 17th, 1600. It was a death that was horrible, that was unspeakable. And what was Giordano Bruno's crime? He held the view that the Catholic Church considered heretical, that there were multiple worlds, that the Ptolemaic view was wrong, and that Copernicus was right. That is exactly why he was burned by the Catholic Church. nearly 2 millennium, the Western world, and for the most part this meant Christendom, had adhered to Aristotle's geocentric model of the cosmos. The Earth, and therefore humankind, was positioned at the center of the universe, a picture well suited to church doctrine about the relationship between nature, humanity, and God. Copernicus, a generation or so before Bruno, had shocked the church establishment by challenging Aristotle's cosmological model and by proposing a heliocentric cosmology. But Bruno was even more radical and declared that not even the sun was the center of the universe. There is no center, he declared. The universe is acentric. Copernicus gained a place in history by removing humanity from the center of the universe. But it was Bruno, a comparatively unsung hero, who effectively removed the anthropocentric illusion that humanity was even remotely in a position of cosmic centrality or special importance. For his outrageous defiance of church authority, Bruno was unceremoniously marched, half naked, to the stake and burned alive in Rome, February 17, 1600.
But they still didn't know much about the rest of the world. In fact, most of them believed the earth was flat. Then one day, a map maker named Christopher Columbus had an idea.
Do you know what? I think the world isn't flat at all. I think it's round like a ball.
Did you hear what he said? Did you hear what he said? He said that the world is round. Oh,
he's crazy man. I think the world isn't flat at all. I think it's round like a ball.
The world's as flat as the brim of your hat, and that is very plain.
I know that I'm right, oh, I know that I'm right when I say that the world is round. Oh, I'm right, oh, I'm right. My thinking is sound and I'll prove the world's round. It won't take very long.
But it did take long, 7 long years, before Columbus could convince a king or a queen to let him try out his idea. Then Queen Isabella of Spain agreed to supply the ships and men for his trip.
I will discover a shortcut to India and bring back some of the great wealth I find there. And I can do it, for I know the world is round.
Of that legendary library, all that survives is this dank and forgotten cellar. It's in the library annex, the Serapeum, which was once a temple, but was later reconsecrated to knowledge. These few moldering shelves, probably once in a basement storage room, are its only physical remains. But this place was once the brain and glory of the greatest city on the planet Earth. If I could travel back into time, this is the place I would visit. The Library of Alexandria at its height 2,000 years ago. To be a citizen of the cosmos. Here were clearly the seeds of our modern world. But why didn't they take root and flourish? Why instead did the West slumber through 1,000 years of darkness until Columbus and Copernicus and their contemporaries rediscovered the work done here? I cannot give you a simple answer, but I do know this. There is no record in the entire history of the library that any of the illustrious scholars and scientists who worked here ever seriously challenged a single political or economic or religious assumption of the society in which they lived. The permanence of the stars was questioned. The justice of slavery was not. Science and learning in general were the preserve of the privileged few. The vast population of the city had not the vaguest notion of the great discoveries being made within these walls. How could they? The new findings were not explained or popularized. The progress made here benefited them little. Science was not part of their lives. The discoveries in mechanics, say, or steam technology, mainly were applied to the perfection of weapons, to the encouragement of superstition, to the amusement of kings. Scientists never seemed to grasp the enormous potential of machines to free people from arduous and repetitive labor. The great intellectual achievements of antiquity had few practical applications. Science never captured the imagination of the multitude. There was no counterbalance to stagnation, to pessimism, to the most abject surrender to mysticism. So when, at long last, the mob came to burn the place down, there was nobody to stop them. But this place was once the brain and glory of the greatest city on the planet Earth. If I could travel back into time, this is the place I would visit. The Library of Alexandria at its height 2,000 years ago. Here, in an important sense, began the intellectual adventure which has led us into space. All the knowledge in the ancient world was once within these marble walls. In the Great Hall, there may have been a mural of Alexander with the crook and flail and ceremonial headdress of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. This library was a citadel of human consciousness, a beacon on our journey to the stars. It was the first true research institute in the history of the world. And what did they study? They studied everything, the entire cosmos. Cosmos is a Greek word for the order of the universe. In a way, it's the opposite of chaos. It implies a deep interconnectedness of all things, the intricate and subtle way that the universe is put together. Genius flourished here. In addition to Eratosthenes, there was the astronomer Hipparchus, who mapped the constellations and established the brightness of the stars. And there was Euclid, who brilliantly systematized geometry, who told his king, who was struggling with some difficult problem in mathematics, that there was no royal road to geometry. There was Dionysius of Thrace, the man who defined the parts of speech, nouns, verbs, so on, who did for language, in a way, what Euclid did for geometry. There was Herophilus, a physiologist who identified the brain rather than the heart as the seat of intelligence. There was Archimedes, the greatest mechanical genius until the time of Leonardo da Vinci. And there was the astronomer Thomas Ptolemy, who compiled much of what today is the pseudoscience of astrology. His Earth-centered universe held sway for 1,500 years, showing that intellectual brilliance is no guarantee against being dead wrong. And among these great men, there was also a great woman. Her name was Hypatia. She was a mathematician and an astronomer, the last light of the library, whose martyrdom is bound up with the destruction of this place 7 centuries after it was founded. Let me tell you about the end. It's a story about the last scientist to work in this place, a mathematician, astronomer, physicist, and head of the school of Neoplatonic philosophy in Alexandria. That's an extraordinary range of accomplishments for any individual in any age. Her name was Hypatia. She was born in this city in the year 370 AD. This was a time when women had essentially no options. They were considered property. Nevertheless, Hypatia was able to move freely, unselfconsciously, through traditional male domains. By all accounts, she was a great beauty. And although she had many suitors, she had no interest in marriage. The Alexandria of Hypatia's time, by then long under Roman rule, was a city in grave conflict. Slavery, the cancer of the ancient world, had sapped classical civilization of its vitality. The growing Christian church was consolidating its power and attempting to eradicate pagan influence and culture. Hypatia stood at the focus, at the epicenter of mighty social forces. Cyril, the bishop of Alexandria, despised her, in part because of her close friendship with the Roman governor, but also because she was symbolized. She was a symbol of learning and science, which were largely identified by the early church with paganism. In great personal danger, Hypatia continued to teach and to publish until, in the year 415 AD, on her way to work, she was set upon by a fanatical mob of Cyril's followers. They dragged her from a chariot, tore off her clothes, and flayed her flesh from her bones with abalone shells. Her remains were burned, her works obliterated, her name forgotten. Cyril was made a saint. The glory you see around me is nothing but a memory. It does not exist. The last remains of the library were destroyed within a year of Hypatia's death. It's as if an entire civilization had undergone a sort of self-inflicted radical brain surgery, so that most of its memories, discoveries, ideas, and passions were irrevocably wiped out. The loss was incalculable.
we got, is it Stephen?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for holding.
No problem, no problem. My question about the show is, I think it was mentioned that I think communists were supposed to be foolish atheists, and I was trying to figure out how that was. I think that's right, or how that worked, because like communism isn't synonymous with atheism.
I can explain that.
I would appreciate it.
Back in the 50s, after World War II, there was this very strong tension between the United States and Russia, and there became kind of a propaganda sent about in the United States that we're not like those evil communists, those evil Russians, because let's grope around and find something. Oh, because we believe in God. So we are the theists and they are the godless communists. And so atheism and communism got to be strongly associated. And to be
worse than that, because you believe in the particular Bronze Age mythology that you do, you also believe that created means being spoken out of nothing and literally wished into being in a method that can only be described as an incantation spell. So how could you convince anyone? You give me no reason to believe you.
With Scripture.
Yeah, that's right, Fatso. This time was known as the Dark Ages, when slave ownership and burning witches, as commanded by Scripture, was seen as a good thing. However, those of us who have stood in the light have little desire to let you lead us back into the darkness. It was not that Western nations were born out of Christian values, such as slavery, burning witches, stoning adulterers, etc., but the Christian countries adopted what we would now describe as Western values, which led to their success. Christianity converted to Western values, and this was Europe's ticket out of the Dark Ages. The lesson is clear. Unless you want to live in a savage Bronze Age biblical culture, learn from the harsh mistress of history. A quick lesson on history. From 600 to 1000 AD, the Islamic Empire was the center of culture, freedom of thought, and scientific advancement in the world. It was they who preserved the knowledge of the Greeks. However, fundamentalists rose to power, and the Islamic nations have sunk into an academic dark age from which they have yet to emerge. By chance, one of the centers of learning in Spain at the height of the Islamic Empire survived and fell into the hands of the Christians, and thus was our academic bloodline to the knowledge of the Greeks preserved. This became the source of the Enlightenment when the Christian nations of Europe adopted such values as free speech.
During the Dark Ages, European culture went to a standstill, and it was basically the feudal system. You don't see much of the feudal system nowadays, and that is because of the Renaissance, when information was brought back from the Middle East, from the Muslims who actually kept that information of the Roman Empire and implemented back into European society. So you can actually thank the Romans, who were pagan, and Islam for European culture now. Fun fact.
Capital, but let me just say this. Sure. They're not a freedom from religion. They're a freedom from history. They have a war on history.
All right, flankers, go! Send in the reserve cohort! Hombre!
In Italy, Galileo had announced other worlds. Giordano Bruno had speculated on intelligent life elsewhere. For this, they were made to suffer brutally.
Sir. It has been an honor and a pleasure leading you. And I am sorry we could not do better. You must look to yourselves now. Save your skins.
Sir.
Give my best to my mother. Tell her. Tell her something suitable.